Hello and welcome to this edition of Tech Talk. This is where we bring technical experts from Cisco
to share their insights on specific topics
selectively chosen based on most common conversation themes
on our technology area in community. Our topic for discussion will be
troubleshooting high CPU due to multicast,
understanding Cisco Unified Communications Security.
And I've seen this question coming up every now and then.
Very good explanation.
I hope it helps the audience.
Hi folks, and welcome to this brand new edition of Tech Talk here on the Cisco support community. This is where we bring technical experts from Cisco to share their insights on specific topics selectively chosen based on most common conversation themes on our technology area. It's an effort to share those valuable insights from those experts on these popular topics. We hope you like it. Our topic for discussion today is Unified Contact Center Express UCCX latest release, which is version 10. This version is packed with a lot of new features and also architectural changes which are introduced. In this edition of Tech Talk, we will discuss in brief about these new features and also some of the key points that needs to be kept in mind in terms of hardware requirements, hardware platform and support. To talk more on the same, we have our expert joining me today is Abhiram Kramadati, a technical support engineer with Cisco's Contact Center Backbone Tag team. Welcome to the Tech Talk, Abhiram.
Hi Satish, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
So let me give a brief introduction about Abhiram. Abhiram has wide experience in UCCX telephony applications, Java telephony API integration, UCCX system behavior, LDAP components, and UCCX as IP interactive voice response in unified contact center enterprise environments. He has been actively handling many technical escalations in the Asia Pacific region and also holds a CCI certification in voice. So Abhiram, I hear that there are a number of new features which are introduced in 10. So you have worked that, extensively worked on that. So what are your thoughts about that?
Oh yes, there are a lot of new features introduced in this version of UCCX. So you have a lot of new features like Finesse, you have CUIC, you have media sense recording, and apart from the new features, you also have a lot of architectural changes that are being introduced. So as a customer, you might not be able to see these changes, but they go a very long way in improving the product stability. And we will discuss more about this through the course of this conversation.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like there will be a number of upgrades to this version. And is there anything different one needs to look out for?
Well, Satish, when you are upgrading to this version of UCCX, the 10.0, the normal scenarios and the normal precautions of any upgrade holds good. But there is one specific scenario which you need to take care for, which is in UCCX 10, we support only Linux to Linux upgrades. So what this essentially means is that if you are a customer who's running a Windows version of UCCX, like 7.x, 6.x or anything below 8.x, you cannot move directly into 10.x. Now mind you, this was possible in the earlier versions. Like if you take an example of 9.x, you could move from 7.0 to 9.0 directly. But then in case you're planning to move to 10.0, you have to first move into an intermediate Linux version and only then will you move into 10.0. Now in the slide, if you can see, I've given a couple of examples, but these are not binding. You can choose your own path, but you will ultimately have to plan for intermediate release, right? Now, while we're on the same topic, there is one important point that we all need to note. And once you move into the Linux version, just make sure that you're on the latest service release, that is the latest SR on that Linux version before you move to 10. Now let me take an example of 8.5. In 8.5, you have to move into 8.5.1 SR4 before you can move into 10 because SR4 is currently the latest. Now, the most common question I have come across in this, in this domain is what happens if a new service release is released in a couple of months down the lane, right? So, for example, again 8.5, if SR5 comes out in 2 months' time, so support will be such that you can upgrade to 10.0 both from SR4 and SR5. So you can, upgrade to 10.0 from any of the latest SRs of that particular Linux version.
Okay. So while we are talking about installation and upgrade, are there any changes in terms of hardware requirement?
I'm glad you brought up this question, Satish, because this, according to me, is one of the biggest and the major changes in terms of UCCX 10.0 in terms of support, as well as installation and all the components you would see in setting up, right? So, unlike the previous version of UCCX, this version of UCCX supports installation only on a virtual environment. Like if you take 9.x, you could have installed 9.x both on an MCS, that's a bare metal server, or on a UCS, which is virtual machine. But 10.x you can install only on a virtual machine. So this is the biggest change in terms of support for hardware on this version. Now, if you are a customer, you will have a question saying that, say I am on 9.0 and I'm on MCS and I want to move into 10.x. So what do I do? So what are the options you have? So in this scenario, you basically have to first migrate the system on the existing version into UCS and then upgrade that into 10.0 on the UCS version, right? So taking this into account, I've basically just charted out two different options you can take, and I've put that into the slide. So if you notice the two options, so the first couple of steps are common. So first you take the backup of the existing server itself, you take a DRF backup. Once you take the DRF backup, install the same server on a virtual machine, make sure it's the same IP address, same host name and all the same details, and then perform a DRF restore of the publisher. Now at this stage you basically have two options. Now option 1, let's look at path 1, what are the advantages and the disadvantages. So you basically reinstall the subscriber, right, with the same version, same credentials, same IP address and host name, add it to the cluster, and then you perform a DRF restore. Now you have fully functional 9.x cluster on the UCS platform, which you can now upgrade to 10.x. Now the second path is, once you have restored the publisher with the DRF restore, you can go ahead and delete the subscriber from the configuration, right? And then once you do that, you can upgrade only the publisher to 10.x and then install the subscriber directly on 10.x and then add it to the cluster. Now in both the paths, at the end of the path, you have a 10.x cluster. But the advantage of path 1 is that in case you're using recording feature of UCCX, you will retain all the recording files, because if you notice how the recording feature works, it is the recording files are stored in a round robin basis. So first call is stored on node 1, second call on node 2 and so on. So if you go ahead with the first path, you will completely retain all the information, but the disadvantage is you will take considerably larger amount of time than part 2. Because you have to restore the second subscriber, upgrade node 1, upgrade node 2, switch version on node 1 and switch version on node 2. But if you look at part 2, you just have to do one upgrade on node 1, switch version, and then add the subscriber directly on 10.x, right? So you save considerable amount of time. But the biggest, the drawback is if you had, recording data on node 2, that will be lost because you will not be restoring from the DRF backup. Now, based on these considerations, you can take a call and on which path you have to go, right? And while we are on the same topic, there is this one troubleshooting tip which I've seen, based on the cases I've handled. And if you can just look out for these two defects, I think you'll have a much smoother transition. So first defect is obviously where this is a pretty well-known defect. We have a field notice also, where the backup is shown as successful. But if you look at the logs, you'll realize that the LDAP component is never backed up. So when you restore the system, you realize that the LDAP component is missing. So this means the agents cannot log in, so you have an outage after the restore. So just what you can do is a very simple step. Once you take the backup, open the UCCX component log and just look for the line which says done executing backup LDAP script. So that basically means that your LDAP is backed up and you have a good backup in the system. Right? And now the other defect is when you do a restore, right? And then once you do a restore, you still realize that your LDAP is missing, but you have ensured that the backup is good, but you still don't understand why the LDAP is not restored, right? So at that point of time, you can turn your attention to this defect, and how you can mitigate the effects of this defect is do a reboot of the server, wait for all the services to come up, ensure that the cluster view daemon or the CVD service is completely up and running in the started state, and then perform another restore. At this point of time, you guys should be good and have a good restored system. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So these details will be there in the blog.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll document all this in the blog. Yes.
Okay. Are there any changes in terms of memory requirements?
Yes, Satish. So if you look at the previous versions of UCCX, and if you do a comparison with the memory requirement of this version of UCCX, the 10.0, you will find that the memory requirement is almost double. So in the slide, you can see that, for example, if you take the 100 agent, The older version, say 8.5, had a requirement of 4 gig of memory, but then UCCX 10 requires you to have 8 gig of memory. Now, the most obvious question that comes is why? Why do you have an increase in memory? So, looking back at the previous versions of UCCX like 8.5 or 9.0, when you install the UCCX, it was only the UCCX application that got installed on the appliance. But with 10.0, when you install UCCX, you have UCCX, you have Finesse, and you have CUIC, who are co-resident on the same box. So this essentially means that you have 3 fully blown applications running out of the same server. So for you to ensure that each of these applications runs with the kind of performance that you would expect, you have increased the memory requirements. Now, if you are installing a UCCX 10.0, and if you use the Cisco OVF template available on cisco.com, you will be able to get this requirement sorted out automatically, because that will take care of all your requirements, including the memory, the number of CPUs, etc. But in case you are upgrading from 9.0 or 8.5, you will have to ensure that you add the additional memory when you come to 10.0. Because if you don't, then you will not be in conformance with these standards, and you will start seeing an error message actually on the app admin. So that's a warning message you have saying that that you are not following the standards. So this might not impact business immediately, but long term it might impact your performance. So the error message will look like this on the app admin, on the application administration page. It will basically warn you that you are not compliant with the standards that we have set. Yeah.
Okay, I think that will definitely help. So, can you quickly walk us through in terms of the new features that are introduced in this release?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, there are a lot of new features introduced. I'll talk very briefly about them, but detail them in the blog as such. So first of all, it's the CUIC, like Cisco Unified Intelligence Center. Now, the CUIC, there was a flavor or a taste of CUIC given in the previous version of 9.0. Now, in 9.0, you had CUIC and the historical reporting client, of course, which is the legacy historical reporting tool for UCCX, and both of them were co-resident. Like you could use either CUIC or HRC. But going forward from 10.0 onwards, it's going to be only the CUIC. So you cannot have HRC and CUIC at the same time. You don't have that option. So in case you're a customer who had CUIC in 9.0, all your configurations like schedules, custom reports will be migrated automatically to 10.0. But in case you are using HRC and you are using schedules, etc., so all those things have to be manually created again, because there is no migration method from HRC to CUIC once you move into 10. So that is one major thing you have to keep in mind in terms of CUIC. And there is a very nice feature called the CUIC Live Data gadget, which is there, which I'll detail in the blog. But that's something which I'm sure the customers will find handy. Now, moving on to the next one, it's Finesse. Now, Finesse, if you ask me, I think it's been one of the most anticipated features of UCCX. Finesse is basically a browser-based desktop, as opposed to the client installed application like CAD, which was the legacy application. So Finesse is going to be completely browser based. It's already in use in UCCE environments, but this is the first time it's being introduced in the UCCX environment. Now, with Finesse, the customers and the partners can play around in creating their own custom gadgets, customizing how the desktop is going to look for the agent, and a lot of other new features. But then just a couple of things you need to keep in mind. One thing is this version of Finesse, or this small flavor, is not going to give you the fully blown features of what CAD offers. Like you can't do outbound and a couple of other features. So you might have to take a look on what Finesse can do for you, and then take a call on whether you want to move into Finesse. And all your agents, like if you have 100 agents, you need to make sure that all 100 of them use either CAD or Finesse only. They can't, you can't have a situation where 50 are using CAD and 50 are using Finesse. So that's you have to use, all of them have to use the same thing. Now, the other one is the media sense recording, obviously, which is again a very feature that was looked forward by a lot of people. Now, the legacy recording and the monitoring solutions of UCCX will still be there with use in CAD, but then now we have an option where you can integrate UCCX with MediaSense, which will then integrate with Call Manager, where you can actually record all the calls of the agents, and all the recording files are stored on the MediaSense, and you can download it, you can play it, you can ship it to another server. So you have a whole new set of features with MediaSense coming in. Now, apart from these, this is just a very brief introduction, but apart from these, obviously you have a lot of other things, like you have the REST API access, that's something that's been introduced for the first time. So REST API access was there in the previous version, but this time you can actually use the REST call from the script editor itself. So you can configure your script to use the REST call. So this is a new feature. So all these and a lot of a whole new architectural change suite is actually introduced, and you can actually read about it in the guides and also the blog. I'll try to write as much as possible, but it's also there in all the documents which are going to come out before the release.
Okay, that helps. So once the user upgrades to 10, are there any surprises that he must be aware of?
Well, yeah, in terms of surprises, when you move to 10, you will not see something out of the blue, but then one feature I particularly want to talk about is the security enhancement, right? So in particular, it's the key store enhancement. Now, if you look at the old feature of UCCX or the old architecture of UCCX, there were two key stores basically. One is the UCCX engine key store, and the other is the platform Tomcat key store. And if you're a user of Call Manager also, you will realize that you can upload certificates into the Tomcat key store using OS administration. So that is something that is exposed to the user. You don't need TAC access. But if you're a UCCX administrator and you're using something like the get URL document, right, and you're trying to make a HTTPS connection to a server that is secure, so you will obviously need to upload the certificate and the certificate chain into the UCCX. But then you just know that UCCX engine has access to only to the engine key store. It doesn't access the Tomcat key store. But then the problem is the engine key store is not accessible by the user. It's only accessed by root. So you had to open a TAC case, get a TAC engineer to give you root access, and then the TAC engineer will upload the certificate for you, and then only then will you move forward. So this was a bit of a cumbersome process, and I think this feature has been implemented after a lot of feedback from the partner community as well. So it's a big step for the product. So what has changed is the UCCX, instead of accessing the engine key store, will now access the Tomcat key store itself. And like I've already told, the Tomcat key store is exposed to the user. So you don't have to contact TAC and obtain root access. You can just upload the certificate and the certificate chain into the Tomcat key store via the OS administration. But then, if you have not already guessed, the one step you have to do, in case you are already using the get URL document, to make a secure connection, is all your old certificates have to be re-uploaded into the OS administration page, via the OS administration page, into the Tomcat certificate store, because the UCCX engine no longer looks into the engine key store. So all your old certificates will be in the engine key store, but you will have to manually upload them again into the Tomcat key store. So if you don't do this, all your calls will start failing in the that go through the script. So if you ask me, this is one thing you just need to keep in mind. It's a very simple thing to do, but it's also simple to miss as well. So it's something that you have to keep in mind. Yeah.
Right. So I think we have covered a lot of sufficient information. But Abhiram, do you have a list of checkpoints that users should be aware of for a successful migration?
Well, yes, Satish, based on the number of TAC cases and the issues seen over the years, I have jotted down a couple of checkpoints. I'm sure you will have more as a customer based on your experience. But then the first thing, of course, is trivial but important, that get your image ready, the right image to upgrade with, and get the licenses ready. And at this stage, what I would like to tell you is, in case you have a problem or in case you have queries regarding which image to use, which license to procure, etc., I would really suggest that you can open a proactive TAC ticket, so the TAC engineer can actually get on a call with you and clarify your doubts before you actually start the process also, right? So the next thing would be, of course, like we discussed, if you are on a Windows platform, plan your upgrade properly, because you'll have to come to a Linux platform first and then you have to move into 10.x. And if you are, especially if you're planning a staggered upgrade, for example, you want to do 7 to 8.5 this weekend and upgrade from 8.5 to 10 the next weekend, so you have to make sure the Call Manager version also remains compatible with the versions that you're moving to, right? So make sure you plan your upgrades properly, including the Call Manager versions. The next thing is, once you move into 10.0, make sure you add additional resources, like add memory if needed. Make sure that you are in conformance with the standards set by Cisco for this UCCX. This will basically prevent two things: that you won't see the warning anymore, and also it will actually give you better performance. I mean, it won't impact your performance during busy call hours or peak business hours. And the next thing would be, of course, if you have moved from MCS to UCS, and this is purely out of experience and previous tag cases, once the restore is completed, right, the DRF page might tell you that the restore is complete, but make sure that the LDAP part is restored as well. So how do you do it? It's very simple. Go to the Cisco desktop administrator page and make sure the entries are not blank. So if you're sure that you're seeing the entries, then it means the LDAP is restored as well. Right? And then just a word of advice or suggestion is that do not decommission your MCS server unless the UCS is completely validated and you're sure it's going into production. Because sometimes what we do in worst case scenarios is we manually migrate the LDAP database from the MCS to the UCS. So if you ever run into such situations, the MCS server will be very useful for us. Right. And of course, lastly, you migrate all your information from HRC to CUIC, like schedules and your custom reporting. And another thing which you have seen the testing is, in case you're not using Finesse, right? If you have 100 agents all on CAD, you don't use Finesse, it is greatly advisable that you shut down the Finesse service, because we have seen high memory and memory spiking, CPU spiking with the Finesse being turned on and it's not being used, and CAD is extensively used. So just turn down the Finesse services if you're not using it. Right, and apart from that, I don't see any much hindrances in terms of you moving into 10.0. It should be a smooth transition. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always get back to us, and if something is broken, which I hope is not, you can always open a tag case. We are always there to help.
Right. Yeah. I believe those details will definitely help users to prepare for a successful migration.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Abhiram, for those details.
It's a pleasure, Satish.
I think so. Hope this Tech Talk on UCCX version 10 was useful to you, and we look forward to your feedback. You can send in your feedback using the comment section of this blog or video. And you may also ask questions and collaborate via various social media channels like Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch us on YouTube, Google+, and LinkedIn. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.